On day 2 of their stay on Rusinga Island, the Kitui in-laws of politician George Opiada Ogada had the enviable pleasure to explore and experience some of the outstanding sights and sounds that the island has in store. At 11:11, they set out on this excursion, the first leg of which I baptized the mausoleum phase. First, they paid homage to the late parents of their son-in-law, who himself was forthcoming about the deceased.
So, this is a small place here. Both my father and my mother are sleeping inside there. Baba died there back in 94. When mom passed on about 20 years old, 94, 2014. 2014, 1994, I didn't want to have 30 years. 20 years. So it's past 20 years after the husband. That's it. Yeah, Papa.
Done dispensing this bit of familial wisdom to his surviving wife, Frida Mwende's people, Mr. Ogada guided the party to the Mboya mausoleum, some 10 kilometers or so away on the western side of the island. The entourage came face to face with the gravesite of Kenya's independence hero and sat around it in studious silence as Collins Ndiege, the mausoleum's curator, delivered a vivid and eloquent account of the life, triumphs, and assassination of Thomas Joseph Mboya.
Now, where the cars are parked is where we had Tom's first house. We call it Simba. Simba is that first house a man builds in his father's homestead.
Collins gave his audience a rundown of the educational journey of the man whom many, both black and white, regard as a genius who lived well ahead of his time.
Tom would start his lower primary. It was called Kabah. Kabah was actually a Catholic missionary school. And by that time, Kabah was the only school around. And you know, it was intermediate kind of education, where there was a national examination in class 4, then you proceeded to class 5 and 6. So because there was no school around, Tom would be transferred to St. Mary's Yala. That is where he did his class 5 and 6. When he was done with primary, Tom would be enrolled at what was called the Holy Ghost Secondary School. Now Holy Ghost is today Mangu High School. So Tom would train there again for only 2 years, but unfortunately, he dropped citing lack of school fee. His father, I remember, only earned 5 shillings a month, and the school fee at Mangu was around 36 shillings. So that was a huge money that the dad could not afford. So Tom had to drop citing lack of school fee.
He narrated how Mboya's Catholic faith saw him evade a P1 teaching course to train as a public health officer.
By that time, the colonial government had preserved a P1 teaching course for the dropout students. So Tom would have trained as a P1 teacher. But lucky enough, Tom was a devoted Catholic. Many a times, he was an altar boy. So he had known several Catholic leadership. Instead of joining the P1 teaching course, Tom would be made away to a gym school in Lower Kabete. Tom would train as a health officer. There was a college called the Royal Sanitary Institute. So Tom trained on health inspectorate. Then later, he'd be employed by the Nairobi City Council as a sanitary inspector. Actually, Tom was like one of the first blacks to be employed in such capacity. That was a job that was meant and preserved for the whites. So this is where most of Tom's problems would start, just because the whites who worked with Tom could not believe they were like sharing the same responsibility with a black. So Tom had been given quite different treatment as opposed to the whites. For example, the whites would smartly dress on a suit. Tom would be forced to wear a kind of uniform, the white khaki short, stockings and some shoes. They would be driven on a Land Rovers, as opposed to Tom, who would be forced to trek as he goes through his normal duties. And Tom would actually be paid a fifth of what the white colleagues doing the same job would be paid. there was a lot of restrictions, like they would not allow Tom to inspect the premises, the health facilities, and even the companies that belongs to the whites. Instead, you would only be allowed to do that on those that belongs to the blacks. Now, this is what actually motivated Tom to come up with different groupings that would speak on behalf of the workers and at least negotiate for their salaries and wages. So Tom would start by calling small groupings into his office. He'd call a group of 4, if more 8, sit them down, collect their grievances and complaints. Then Tom would be courageous enough to present this before the colonial masters.
Collins also told the guests that the labor movement proved handy for Mr. Mboya following the ban on political activities by Governor Evelyn Baring's October 20th, 1952 state of emergency in response to the murder of loyal local colonial administrator Chief Waruhio Wakungu at the start of that month.
Now, the state of emergency would ban like all the organizations that had come in, the few of the minor political parties, but Tom's organization, which was the labor movement, would be spared. That was because many a times they would do their things in a diplomatic way. They actually did not want to see there were lootings and grabbings and even bloodshed. So at times, Tom would even be seen and heard in an open gathering criticizing the killings, lootings, and grabbings. So they spared this to be used as a mediator between the locals and the whites.
The crash course on the life and times of Tom Mboya culminated in the reference to a series of assassination attempts on the young man whose political star was undimmable, save only through physical murder.
They started looking into ways and means on how they would bar Tom from contesting. There was a time they would sneak an amendment that actually wanted to raise the age so that if you want to vie for presidency, you must at least have like 42 years and above. They knew very well Tom was below 40. That would be the easiest way of blocking him. But now Tom being a schemer by excellence, Tom would raise numbers in the parliament to beat the amendment. So the only option was now to hatch and plot for his assassination. Now this followed by a series of political assassination attempts. The last one that worked was through a very close friend of him, Isaac Nash and Jenga Joroge. Now, Jenga and Tom had both worked for KANU. Actually, when Tom was the KANU Secretary General, Jenga was the KANU youth leader. Tom is the one who secured him a job in the military. Later, Jenga became a sniper, so Tom decided to have him as the head of his security details. By the time Jenga was gunning Tom down, he was among the few KANU youth wingers that Tom had taken to Bulgaria to be trained as police reservists. But Jenga would be given a special military training as a sharpshooter. So when they returned from Bulgaria, Jenga would be approached by Tom's rivals that argued they were in a better position to form the next government, and Tom was like blocking their way.
The rest, as we say on these shores, is history. The remains of this brother lie buried for 55 years now. The family still hopes for justice.
But remember, Tom's case is still open. So going by Kenya's constitution, you may not speculate on what is still before the court.
Once bitten, twice shy, but not with Tom's family, as Collins discloses.
We are still in politics and very active. And not to guess, even in 2027, we have a candidate from this family. So we are still active in politics, but we are very keen.
Tell us that candidate.
Yeah.
There is Tom's brother called Victor.
Victor.
Yes.
What is he vying for?
He's vying for an MP.
MP.
Yes.
We are now mixed up, but my team have come from the two.
Yes.
And there's a lot of differences between the family of Mboya, or the family of Ndege, and the Kamba family.
Yeah, I was waiting to do that inside because we have a portrait. Remember, Peter, Tom's firstborn son, got married to Charles Mbindio's daughter, Gladys. Then Gladys, Peter's wife, is the daughter to Mbindio. You know Mbindio? Yeah, so Gladys is here with us, even though Peter died. But she's very strong, and she's okay with us.
Kevin Otieno, Suba North. Homa Bay County.